What is the most out-of-touch thing an older person has told you? My dad, at Christmas. If I need, I can sell my pain meds on the black market and make a fortune. Me, where is this black market? Dad, eBay. God's sake. Unfortunately, that's not as easy as the news warned me it would be. I tried and failed. I had to do what I normally do. Physically go ask someone in the right place and hang out for a bit. I did get a few scam messages trying to get me to send them money up front. I know. Everyone says it's so easy to connect online, but I only find scammers. Personal introduction is the only way that works for me. I don't even know any places to hang out to meet the right people, haha. There used to be a time on Facebook in Asia, early Facebook in Asia, where people would sell babies. Filipino migrant workers sent to China, Singapore, Taiwan, etc. would go be maids. They would either be tricked or asked to have babies to sell. Facebook, before having a marketplace, would have posts of babies. Some sellers would use code, but about half would have prices. Babies that had undesirable features or got too old would be maimed and put on the street to beg for money. The money would be collected by other people, and they would be allowed to have whatever food they were given. As stupid as it sounds to sell pills on eBay, which honestly I'm sure you could, crazier things have happened. He's got the right idea, just bad implementation. Okay, I'm just glad it ended up being eBay he was referencing, and not some bad website of whatever city he's from. A newlywed couple I'm related to was out taking wedding pictures in a little town square with their entire bridal party. We're a big Asian family, and it's reflected in who's in the bridal party aside from one of the groomsmen who served in the armed forces with the groom. An older white woman and her husband saw them and made their way to the venue, a hall that opened up to the main street. She came up to my uncle and me, who were ushering people in, and said, "Are you the wedding for the bridal party taking pictures outside?" We both said yes, and she went on, "Oh, everyone looks so nice, but one of the groomsmen is white?" I didn't think anything of her comment the first time, and explained how he's a close friend who served with the groom. She decided to double down and said again, "But he's white." Again I said, "Well, yes, but he's a close friend of the groom." "But he's white." Which prompted my uncle with, "Well, we asked for another minority at the groomsmen's store, but all they had left were white boys." During this whole exchange, the husband of the lady was walking ahead not catching what was going on. He turned back to see what his wife was doing, pushed her along, and apologized to my uncle and me for what had just happened. The whole experience left me dumbfounded. Like, what is this in the 50s? Are we still not allowed to have interracial friendships? Someone I know who is in their 70s commented on this commercial with an interracial couple. She says, "Boy, they are trying to push interracial couples." I just looked at her like, "Are you insane?" I said, "Yeah, it's great. You do realize my husband and I are an interracial couple, right?" She didn't say anything. I'm still dumbfounded by her comment, though. This crazy person is my mother-in-law. Lol. If she was Japanese, it might be hard for her to understand why, for instance, her family had to give up everything to be guarded behind barbed wire in their own country by white boys from the military. Me showing off the wedding photos I took at a client's wedding, who also happened to be my coworker to a family member. "Oh, you didn't tell me she was black." What difference does it make? When will young people stop their obsession with race? Boomers are about to end you by over-carbon consumption. Anyway, thank you for sharing. My dad visited me in the restaurant I was working in at the moment during peak hours and said, "Just tell your boss you're taking your break now and sit with me." Yeah, that's not how it works. My dad has come to visit me, uninvited, at every job I've ever had. From gas station cashier to administrative assistant. When I would have to interrupt his conversation to do my job, he would say with an annoyed tone, "Okay, I see you're busy." Yes, that's what we do at work, Dad. I once drove 3 hours to shop at a grocery store where my son was a cashier when he was in college. Of course, I bought something so I could go through his lane. I took a picture of him when he was ringing up the person in front of me and heard him say to the customer, "Please just ignore the people behind you. They are my parents." They got a good chuckle out of it. I didn't interrupt his work, though. I took him out to dinner after he got off. Good on you. I bet he enjoyed a real meal and not what every broke college kid eats for supper. My oldest got his first job in August, and I'm blind, so I had to find a ride out there, around 40 miles away because we lived in the backwoods until the end of that month. So I get a ride and go in and hear a lady call out, "Jay, come on out the grill. I think this lady is your mama." "How do you know?" he hollered. "Because she's blind and looks a lot like your Nana." I had to laugh at that. She was 100% right. I look just like my mama. My parents visited me a few months ago. They arrived Sunday afternoon and stayed through to Wednesday. They complained that I wasn't spending time with them. It's a weekday. You decided to visit me with a 1-week notice. Sorry, I can't hang out with you. Then they asked if they could come by my office and meet my coworkers and have a look at the office. Not. This isn't kindergarten where we bring our parents to school for the day. They were upset by that and asked why. Because Dad doesn't know how to behave around new people. He says inappropriate things all the time. You will infantilize me to my coworkers. And it's just weird. Who brings their parents to work? No. Stay home. I told my boss I wasn't drinking water and was scared to get up to use the bathroom because one of our directors called me twice in like 2 months when I went to pee and got mad about it. I spent the majority of my time at my last job eating lunch at my desk because my supervisor wasn't helping with my workload as they said they would, and then when I brought it up, they denied it. I told my senior director I didn't feel supported and that I was still fielding questions about my old role. They eliminated my team, and she denied it. I said okay, and then I quit an hour later. They also apparently don't believe in people getting 15-minute breaks. I graduated from law school with a focus on labor and employment law. I am aware of what my rights are. This is still the law in most states as far as I am aware. It's insane that older folks were able to have this, but also don't understand how much it is being taken away from younger people, regardless of legality. OMG, my husband's mom did something like this in recent years. They own a small family-style restaurant with very few employees, and the employees are all family or close family friends. So, of course, if the restaurant is slow and her son or niece needs to run to the store, she just has them go. She got mad at me a couple of years ago because I didn't take my husband to drop his car off at a shop across town at 3 p.m. I explained that he hadn't even told me he had to do it until I had already taken my lunch break for the day, and that even if he had, there would be no guarantee that I could move my lunch hour to be that late. Plus, I would have to skip lunch, but I would have been willing to do that if needed. I just couldn't. She was shocked and angry that I couldn't just tell my boss at my normal 8:05, "I'll be right back in like an hour, I have to run an errand." I was honestly flabbergasted that she could think like that in this day and age. I had a clueless friend I hadn't spoken to in years come into my shop during the dinner rush with a group of his friends and pull this move. One of the reasons we grew distant was because he was so shallow. Everything he did had to be documented on social media. He drove a car he couldn't afford while living in a house his parents bought for him. Told me he was a baller on a budget, whatever that means. He wanted to show his friends he knew the owner. Told him I was working. It was one of those all-hands-on-deck shifts. I was on the register with a line out the door and wrapped around the building, and he kept insisting. I told him off in front of his friends and made him pay for his food. We weren't friends anymore after that. Enjoy that. I'm sure he knows you're busy. The fact that he wants to just come visit you and see you at work is huge. My dad visited me at work only once in my life. He picked me up from my first job. I had been there for about 4 months. I was 15, had my permit, and was saving up money for a car so I could drive myself. My mom usually picked me up, but she was tired that night. I was about 30 minutes later than the time my mom told him I would be off, and I didn't check my phone because usually my mom just got there early and waited for me. He ended up storming in angrily, made a scene in front of everyone, and yelled at me the whole way home. Ah, memories. Anyway, I like the story. From a parent. When we die, you can just fly over here and move in for 6 months while you figure out what to do with all of our stuff. Sure, and what income will I have after I need to quit my job to do this? You can retire because surely all the knickknacks they've collected have skyrocketed in value. They're doing you a favor. This is something I tried to impress on my move-in for 6 months parent. If something in this house has value that isn't obvious, make it clear, please. I wasn't in the mood to spend Christmas walking around their home asking the value of everything. That would have felt a bit weird on multiple fronts. But when they mentioned in passing that the old, unassuming clock on the wall is from the French Revolution, I panicked a little, not going to lie. I don't want a 300-year-old thing to end up in the trash because no one knows what it is. My parents loved to procure collectibles that they thought would be of more value later. They may or may not have been right, but they had been refinancing to keep financially afloat, so when they passed, the mortgage on the house was over $2,000/month. No way my siblings could afford that, so we had to empty and liquidate the house ASAP. Perhaps some of the things could have had value if I had months to find buyers, but we were forced to sell what we could at deep discounts at the estate sale and then donate trash the rest. My mother has lists of people who she thinks will want all her stuff. And if they don't want it, I am supposed to donate it to the Smithsonian. I live overseas and have small children, and she thinks I'm just going to fly over and leave my kids and husband to sort everything out. Also, she has a list of places she wants me to sprinkle her ashes all over the world that I am just supposed to fund myself. My 96-year-old grandmother the other week told me that she wants my dad to have her bowling trophies because he's in a bowling league so he might like them. Mind you, these aren't professional trophies. These are Wednesday morning small-town bowling league trophies. Her furniture is mostly a worn floral couch, an entertainment center built for a tube TV, a secretary, and a grand piano. She started having her aide put colored stickers on things she wanted certain people to have. I'm sure that she's forgotten what color belongs to whom and has lost the list by now. That's practically what we had to do when my mother passed away in April this year. I couldn't tell you the number of truckloads of stuff we took to charity organizations and the number of trips to the dump, and that was after all 5 kids and a dozen grandkids and grandkids got what they wanted. I couldn't believe one person, my dad passed 22 years earlier, could have so much stuff. It's not something I think anyone wants to do while dealing with the loss of their loved one. I do have to admit there were days when I just couldn't deal with it, and I'd just turn around and leave. It seems so daunting some days, like, where do I even start and what to do with all this stuff? Who would want it and is even worth giving away? It's a lot of mental stress. I have a similar situation. My mom is so heartbroken that her stuff will mostly be donated or trashed. I've tried to explain to her that we'll, of course, keep things that give us memories of her and that she truly loves, like we're each keeping a teacup as she's intensely obsessed with her teacup collection. But I'm sure she'd be upset if she knew we won't be keeping all 90 of them. We can't quit our jobs to go through every one of her belongings, and I live in a different state and my sister in a different country. Without fail, anytime someone dies in their old folks' mobile home, which is a lot, she talks about the heartless kids just getting rid of their belongings. Like, sorry, if your nostalgia egg cooker from HSN doesn't fit in my luggage, it's not coming. All the comments to this comment make me feel better about my own situation, LOL. My parents are the same, except they are like, don't worry, our family's friend will take care of everything, so you don't have to do much. My parents have so many things, and for some additional reasons, I am not as optimistic. Anyway, thank you for this delicious story. Young people have no pride left. Why do they think it's okay to still live with their parents at 20? The average age to move out of a parent's home in the UK is 35. Because there's a rental crisis and a housing crisis, especially in non-English countries partially, because the retired English keep buying second homes in Wales, Scotland, and NI. Wages have barely increased, but rent and mortgages have increased by extreme amounts, and this is because of their generation. Why older people don't understand this concept is beyond me. I'm from an Asian country, and in Asian culture, it's very common for people to stay with their parents until they get married. Even then, it's also common for the married couple to stay with their parents, especially because they can help with potential kids. It's usually a sign that they have a good relationship, good enough to want to continue staying together. Granted, we're currently facing a housing crisis as well, but it's been so common that I still can't wrap around my head the idea that it's not okay to stay with your parents past a certain age. I remember sitting next to a colleague of mine a few years ago in August. Every year he had been away in August so he could visit his parents in India. I asked why he was at work, and he smiled and said he had been able to have his parents legally immigrate to the US and that they were moving into his home. I remarked that I figured this was temporary while they looked for a home of their own, but he corrected me that they were going to live with him. When I asked why, he smiled sadly and replied, kind of like an ELI 5. Why would I not want my parents to live with me? Why indeed? The US is so age segregated we don't even see it. They don't understand because it doesn't happen to them. I'm mindful of it because I experienced it. But as soon as I got a fixed-rate mortgage, less than what my rent was, volatility in the housing market was instantly just not a thing I had to deal with anymore. It's bananas how since 2019 the market has gone nuts, I hear you, and I see online that a 2BR apartment costs far more per month than my 3BR house. I'm not trying to justify their complete disconnect with the economic realities they've inflicted on generations that followed theirs, like how someone with a high school degree can't go get a factory job that pays enough to support their whole family. I'm just saying that's how it happens. They never faced those affordability issues personally, and they cannot empathize, so they just don't understand them. And it's way easier to call everyone else lazy than it is to make a meaningful effort to examine how economic realities are changing. Stay with me on this. One of the most iconic concepts pioneered by horror author Lovecraft was creatures that drove a person insane simply by looking at them. It's not that the monster has some sort of magical aura that breaks human minds. It's that it's so horrible that a human can't hold it, and the idea of a rational universe in their mind at the same time. And since the monster is right in front of them, it must be the rational universe that doesn't exist. If boomers accepted that the world has been made objectively worse for their children via their actions, they wouldn't be able to hold the idea that they're good people who looked out for their kids in their heads at the same time. But they wouldn't be able to live with themselves if that were true. So it must not be. I wish we could normalize people living with their parents. I frankly do not see it as a big deal or a bad thing in most cases. The only instance where I can imagine it being wrong for someone to live with their parents is when both of the following conditions are met. 1. The parent, S, cannot afford to support the household with the child, Ren, living there, and 2. The child, Ren, refuse to work or contribute to the household finances. Unless both of those statements are true, it's frankly nobody's business how they choose to live. If the child, Ren, refuses to work, but the parents are okay with it and can afford that living arrangement, you're not doing them any favors in life, but it's nobody's business. Is the child, Ren, willing to work to pick up the slack and make sure the finances are covered? Nobody's business? I don't care if you're 18, 28, 38, 48, 58, whatever ... it quote s nobody's business. His was in 1992. I had just turned 11. My parents always took my sister and me to the polling place with them when they'd vote in elections, and that's what we were doing that morning. My dad had stopped to vote on the way to drop my sister and me off at school. As we're leaving the polling place, for some reason, I can't remember the details on how this happened, my dad ends up getting into a conversation with an older man near the exit. Somehow it came up that he had brought us to the polls so that we would know about voting when we were old enough, and was about to drop us off at school. This old man said, "But they're both girls. They don't need to vote, and shouldn't that one be done with school now?" He meant me. My dad was basically like, "Excuse me, what?" And this dude informed him that girls only went to school until the 6th grade. Dad handled it fine. He was just like, "None of that has been the case for a long time. I've got to take my daughters to school now. Have a nice day," and sort of ushered us out. Out of all the out-of-touch things said to me by older people over the years, mostly just the usual walk in, hand them your resume, and don't walk out until the manager gives you a job kind of thing. Nothing compared to the man in the polling place who thought I should be done in school, and that it was frivolous to teach me about voting due to my gender. I remember that old man every time I vote, and I've never missed an election. I didn't think I had a good anecdote for this thread until I read this, and it reminded me of an interaction of my own that made my blood boil. I was 23 and working as a production assistant on a reality TV show airing on National Geographic. This was something I was pretty proud to have accomplished, considering I started with basically no connections, and this was not in a big city. We were filming at a farm, and the farmer pulled me aside and told me that I was frittering my life away because I, a young woman, was 23 and not married with kids. I was like, okay. And then he proceeded to tell me about his mother, who got married at 16 and had 3 kids by the time she was my age. And then he told me about his wife, whom he married the summer before she started her senior year of high school. My male coworkers all just kind of shrugged it off, but I was so mad. I'm still mad. Guys, I feel this. I was diagnosed at 26 with cancer, and I froze some eggs before chemo. The amount of family members that fixated on the fertility stuff and not the months and months of chemo part was astonishing. I even had a few aunts say to me, on multiple occasions, "IVF is great because then you have a higher chance of giving me twins." Like, okay, maybe we should focus on me not dying first and then cross the bridge of having children for my aunts. My lady's mother is like that. She's overweight. She always says that her daughter is too skinny and it's not healthy, which she isn't. Her way of thinking seems rooted in the fact she hasn't educated herself properly and only believes something is true after she has read from a reliable source. And then it's usually, OMG, did you guys realize this? Or, you shouldn't do that because... And usually it's something we've been telling her for years. Nice lady, just a little daft. The truly frightening part of that conversation is that people who think like that are still voting. And they're voting for politicians who promote that view, that women should shut up and just raise children and not have the right to vote or own property or have rights over their bodies or a say in who they marry or whether they can get a divorce. Anyway, I hope you're good. My mom, who hasn't worked outside the home in 40 years, complained about the homeless beggar outside Walmart where there was a big banner saying they were hiring. Why can't they just go in and get a job? I had to explain that when I was looking for a job, I had a home, reliable transportation, good work history, good references, and education. I had clean and professional clothing, the ability to keep myself hygienic, an ID, a phone and computer I can reliably be contacted at. I come from an upper-middle-class family, and the ability to take care of and treat my mental health. And even with all that, I sometimes wouldn't even get called in for an interview at an entry-level job. Or if I was lucky enough to get an interview, I wouldn't necessarily get a call back to even tell me I didn't get the job. Like, I know Walmart isn't looking for much, but the job market is still competitive. Do you think Walmart is going to hire someone who doesn't have basic resources available to even ensure they can show up for a job? I couldn't believe how out of touch she was and how much she took for granted to believe you could just stroll in anywhere and be handed a job without anything to your name. I remember when my phone was dying and I needed it to be able to contact work. Charger broke. Asked my mom if she could buy me a charger and got told no, so I used all of my savings, 37 and change. I wasn't working many hours due to my age. I walked an hour and a half to the Verizon store using my DS as a clock because my phone was dead at that point. I was lucky enough to get a small discount on the charger. It was for a very old flip phone, and no way I would have been able to find the same at Walmart. I was able to afford it with the discount. Still very grateful for that employee. It's harder for some people to even do the little things, so working is possible. We all need more empathy. I worked at Walmart for 8 years. The last few years I was there, if you tried to apply in person, they would say, "We don't take resumes anymore. You have to apply online." That was almost 10 years ago. Any job I've had since then has been online applications, followed by a phone interview, and then finally an in-person interview, all of which were set up by email confirmations. If you don't have regular access to the internet, you can't even apply to places anymore. It's not really about the character of the person, but a matter of resources available to them. A person who can provide a valid driver's license and demonstrate they have a reliable way to show up to work and have clean clothes to wear is going to have a huge leg up on someone who doesn't. Now consider how competitive the job market is right now. My point is that it's not as simple as walking in and being handed a job. Thank you for sharing.